Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in as we continue on with our English 1102 course. I'm just looking at our due date, so we finished up Unit 5 back on Friday. It's Monday when I'm recording this. And now we look at Unit 6, which is a unit on secondary sources, and I'll have more to say about it in a second. But just to draw your attention to the fact that Unit 7, which would normally be a week away from us because of the pace of the course, is right around the corner. So due Wednesday, June 12th, and it's our first essay. So really this announcement will cover kind of a couple of the units that we're moving through right now. So let me talk about Unit 6 right now, but again, the bigger picture here is to be aware of Unit 7, the essay unit, which I'll talk about after I talk about this one. This is going well so far, don't you think? Yeah. Okay, so there's a short reading here, a couple of other short stories that I'm asking you to read. And again, the short story reading that we do is really in preparation for writing the essay. So you may in fact focus just on one of these various stories we've read. So if you didn't really like one of them, that's perfectly okay. Hopefully there's one that kind of grabbed your attention maybe a little bit more than the others. And Unit 6 is one of those units that work-wise is very straightforward. It's kind of a half-hour job, if that, to be perfectly honest. In addition to the reading, maybe another half an hour, depending on how fast of a reader you are, but really not a major time commitment. A little bit like that previous unit on the shape of an essay or shape of a paragraph, managing the general and the specific. This is one of those units, though, that despite the fact that the workload is very, very minimal here, it's absolutely one of those cornerstone units for us because, again, English 1102 is the research course, so finding appropriate secondary sources, or what are sometimes just called sources or critical sources, for our the essays that we write is just absolutely one of those fundamental things that you have to be able to do correctly to pass English 1102. So again, this unit could take you all of 10, 20, 30 minutes to complete, and you could kind of breeze through it and just get sort of the points or not, and it's fairly limited point value here. But if you can't apply this when it really matters in those essay situations, that's when you kind of get into trouble. So don't let the kind of lightness of the workload here fool you into thinking that it's not that important in terms of the concept that we're learning. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward. There's some tutorial stuff on just using the library within the unit here, but there's also some video material that you'll find, I think, a couple of places in the course, but I just want to remind myself for sure. I think it shows up in Unit 7, if not 8. Yeah, so you'll find it in Unit 7 here. There's a couple of videos that walk you through producing a works cited page, which is all part and parcel of managing sources, figuring out how they would show up in your works cited page, and then citing them correctly within the text of an essay or whatever you happen to be writing. So, pardon me. In addition maybe to the Unit 6 work that really is not that demanding in Unit 6 itself, this is a really good opportunity to read ahead into Unit 7, the essay unit, but also to take a look at things like the MLA citation links area of our course here, which provides you with, again, lots of examples and models to follow in terms of doing MLA citation right, whether it's finding sources, citing sources, putting your works cited page together, all that kind of stuff, which seems, probably it seems a little bit secondary to writing a good essay about one of the short stories, but again, because of the nature of our course, even if you're writing a really interesting analysis of one of the short stories, if you're not doing basic things like finding sources correctly, using them correctly in an essay, citing them, citing from the primary text the short story correctly, and then putting a works cited together, you could have a great analysis part of the essay, but if that other piece isn't there, then you just can't really move past English 1102. So again, what might seem like kind of the secondary stuff to the content of the essay itself is, for our purposes, really sort of the primary stuff. So that's where you really need to focus your attention. So you'll find in the MLA citation links area here, as clearly as I could make it, a few basic examples of how sources are likely to appear in your essay and thus how to cite them. You'll find a little, it's a PDF form here, but if you want to think of it as a handout that you could print for yourself, so you could actually have your essay that you're writing and then refer to this thing externally without having to switch screens and manage that kind of stuff. There's a sample works cited page, which shows you how the whole thing is formatted in terms of double spacing and just the look of the whole page itself. And then, of course, the videos duplicated here, walking through how you'd actually put a works cited page together. So hopefully there's ample material that you can do this very important thing correctly. And like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of weight on this, which can seem like a sort of glass half empty situation, but really it's glass half full, because a lot of this, the weight that's on here, it's on something that's actually fairly simple to do correctly. And there's tons of models to follow. It's not something magical or mystical that you've got to just somehow figure out. I don't think that would be fair for me to do to you, and so I've really made an effort on my end of it here, the course end, to make things as clear as possible so that you can see the example and then apply it in your writing situation. Okay, so Unit 6, it's really important that you understand what a relevant and primary secondary source is. It's explained in the unit. I'll probably reiterate it as we get a little further along in our course. But again, if by the time we're doing the final essay for the class, you're not using appropriate and relevant secondary sources, you're unlikely to pass or receive a passing grade for that final essay and thus the course itself, because it's something that, again, is so kind of fundamental to what you have to learn in English 1102. Let's skip forward then to Unit 7, which is our first essay. So we kind of take a step backwards, or at least away from the whole secondary source or the research aspect of it. And instead we focus just on writing about a short story. Unit 8 you'll see is essay number 2, but in fact what it is a revision of essay 1 in which you can change things and fix things, but also integrate a secondary source. So you will be using a secondary source for this essay, just not in its first version, which is Unit 7. Okay, so there's some basic reminders here about just sort of stylistic things. No I voice. It just kind of gets in the way of what you actually want to say. You are doing an interpretation of a work, not your subjective evaluation, like it was great, it was boring, the author does a good job of this, she doesn't do a good job of that kind of a thing. You're really arguing for a literary interpretation. If you're still kind of fuzzy on what that is, remember that our textbook has a lot of sample essays and you can look at those. But even more valuable is the very first thing that you're required to do as part of Unit 7 here, which is to look through the sample essays, through their sample essays link, that are not just the text of the essay, but I'm just opening it up here, like a little kind of narrated video thing that you can work through that'll really draw your attention to some positive aspects of the samples we're looking, but also some negative things or things that we kind of want to stay away from, that I voice or the personal voice being one of them. So again, Unit 7 begins with what seems like a kind of throwaway piece, and you want to get to the actual essay that you've got to write. But notice that this first thing you've got to do, go through the sample essays, feeds into writing the essay successfully, which is, of course, where all the points for the class are. Okay, so, etc., etc. The assignment for Unit 7, essay number 1, is hopefully pretty straightforward. There's a number of prompts you can choose from in terms of approaches to one of the stories that you might want to write about. I caution against writing about Sherman Alexie's flight patterns only because there's not a lot of secondary source material that's easy to get at and apply in an essay situation. It's a good story, but it just doesn't lend itself to essay number 2, which is going to ultimately be a revision of 1 with the integration of a source. So you kind of want to set yourself up by writing on a story for which there's lots of secondary or research material. And of course, just like for Unit 6, once we get to Unit 8, which will be a revision of the Unit 7 essay, you're finding material, secondary sources or research material that's relevant and appropriate from the databases, so not just like general web stuff. Again, basic mistakes like that will really cost you in terms of your grade. And it's so easy to get right because it's stuff we've already done or will have done in Unit 6 here. So the essay itself is not complicated. It's 3 to 4 pages double spaced, which is not a huge amount of work, or page number, word count wise. So it's pretty manageable, and really we are focusing on a fairly limited number of things. How you manage the general and specific, your thesis statement, its effectiveness, your integration of quotation from the primary text, the short story, as a supporting mechanism for the ideas that you want to put forward, and then really fundamentally how well you integrate that material, and then do you get the MLA citation correct and the works cited part. And again, there's kind of a disproportionate weight on that because of the class we're in. English 1102 is the research class, but take advantage of that fact by just following the models that are presented here and doing it correctly. There's really no mystery to it. Makes it sound really boring and mechanical, and kind of it is, but you can make that work kind of to your advantage if possible. Okay, so Unit 6 is on your plate right now, but make sure you've read ahead maybe into Unit 7 and 8, because that is our first essay, which is kind of like where the major points for the course start, whatever. Notice too that because of the pace of our term, we're actually into our midterm week here, so we're not quite, but almost halfway through, which is great news. You're putting together these pieces that now you're going to apply in terms of individual concepts that now come together in the first essay, and then really we get towards that final essay where you really want to bring everything together. So in a strange way, we're actually at midterm, but really working towards the end of our course. So if you've made it this far, you're doing great. Okay, so I will leave off there. If you have questions, concerns, whatever, be in touch with me, and otherwise I will talk to everybody relatively soon.